Yeah, so it'd probably be good if that's the last one. If you say anything, that's okay. Thank you, welcome, and we look forward to hearing all three of these candidates.
Tonight's forum will be done under league guidelines. We will give each candidate 2 minutes for opening, 1 minute to answer questions, and then 1 minute at the end for closing remarks. Our timekeeper is Dawn Ellison. She's in the front row. She will signal with a yellow.
But I'm running for the board because I see a failure to lead and a failure to plan. When you look at what's going on with the current board, you see a lack of focus. The focus of the water district, it was originally created for 2 purposes: flood control along the Trinity River and making sure we have water. Since then, a lot of the focus has been off on economic development, and I think it's time we bring that focus back, because I'm an engineer. Engineers look at problems and try to find ways to solve them. Raise your hand if you think water is a problem. Absolutely, it's a huge problem. You look at some of the communities up to the west of here, and some of them may have less than 300 days of water left. They're drastically trying to figure out what we can do. Fortunately, through decades gone by, the board has done a very good job of planning for our needs so that we're in a pretty good shape right now. However, our future, if we don't return the focus on water, is going to be a case where Fort Worth could dry up like a leaf, because there's lots and lots of people moving here because it's a great place to live. We've got people coming here from all over the United States because it's an exciting place to live. But with that comes increased water needs. So as my job as an engineer, I work to solve problems, I also manage people, and I manage projects, and I think that's something that the board desperately needs right now, is some project oversight, if you've looked at a lot of their projects. And so I think I have a great experience that I can bring to the board to help solve these problems, help work with people, and help get these projects on track. Thank you.
We have a huge concern with flooding, and over the last couple of weeks with all the rain and stuff, it just continues to happen. And in speaking with some people over this past couple of days over at Arlington Heights, it's an even bigger concern over there as well. And when we have a board that's focused on economic development and not on sourcing water and flood control, which is their main priorities, then we've lost focus and we've lost leadership, and we really need to get back on the core mission of what it's supposed to be about. And another huge concern is they're using a lot of eminent domain to take property from people to do this economic development. And instead of doing that for maybe flood control or things that are appropriate, you're taking people's businesses and homes and using it in a power that is not beneficial to the majority of the people. And that's really unfortunate that that's the way it's been going over the last 10, 20 years. I live, as I mentioned, on the east side of Fort Worth. I'm married 19 years in June. My husband is a native of Fort Worth, born and raised here, graduated from Pascal High School. I've been in Tarrant County for 40 years in Hearst, where I grew up at, and we're raising 2 of our children over here. And I appreciate the opportunity to come out and speak with everybody today.
About water. You know, if you look at the TRWD website, it looks like you can go swimming or fishing or wading or kayaking in any part of the river, and it would be great. There's even a little picture down in one part of it that says, "Come out and play," and it has a guy wakeboarding in the air. It looks great. I pulled off the 11 reports from the water report areas that they measure. 8 of them say it's not safe to be there. 2 of the ones that say it is safe to be there, the last time they were measured is in December 14th. Now, I've said this at every forum, but normally I get called a liar by someone who isn't here tonight. So I thought I would read data from the TRWD website to say that, in fact, it is not a clean river as it should be and as it is presented. That is a problem I want to solve. The second thing that this race is about is water. Since 1970, Texas has been getting hotter. If you've ever boiled water, you understand that there is a relationship between heat and water, and it does not benefit water. Evaporation is real, and they are not planning for the fact that it's getting hotter in Texas. If you look at their water plan, they're thinking about starting to study that this year instead of looking at the historical data, and they're going to measure every 5 years to figure out if it's a problem. It is a problem. It's one we need to address now. The third thing that this race is about is water. You know, there was a study done by the Army Corps saying we needed to fix the Trinity River and the flood control, about a $70 million project. That has somehow become a $1 billion economic development project that includes things like eminent domain, includes things like really sketchy deals and uncertain ways for the future of that project. I'm not fundamentally opposed to it, but I want to make sure they do it right. So.
Main purpose it's supposed to be, and that is flood control and making sure that we have enough water in the generations to come. They're too busy focusing on economic development and other projects and not focusing on what is the core mission, as we've said before, that they are supposed to be doing. And this is one of the fastest growing areas in the nation, and if we continue on this path, we're not going to have water to survive. My children, I mentioned my husband grew up here, I grew up here. Our children, I'm sure, plan to live here as well. And if we're not going to have water for the generations to come, all this economic development really isn't going to mean a lot.
Mr. Hill.
So as I mentioned earlier, this race is about three things. It's about water, it's about water, and it's about water. That is the core mission of the Tarrant Regional Water District, and they are failing at that mission. They have been distracted, and they're not willing to do their job in a way that is effective. We need to change that. We must change that. If there's going to be a future in this area, we have to start planning in a much better way and in a way that realistically looks at what is happening in North Texas. Not just the population growth, but also the environmental changes that are taking place that we must address now. If we fail to do that, we are failing to protect my children and their children's future. And that to me is unacceptable.
I think one of the biggest issues in this race is transparency. And not just the transparency of the water in the Trinity River, which I think the word there is opacity. It's very opaque. You've seen it. But transparency with the board letting you know what's going on, letting you know how decisions are being made. When decisions are being made in a meeting behind closed doors that the public's not allowed in, and then they're brought out in front of the board and rubber stamped, that's not how people want their government to run. Anybody should be able to attend any of these meetings, whether a quorum is present or not. We need transparency. We need to be able to put this information online where you can find it so you know who's getting your money. You know where the contracts are going to different businesses, and you know what is being done with your resources. And so you want to make sure that your future is planned for, but you also want to know that what's going on as part of the board is in your best interest. And right now I don't think that's the case.
It is visibly apparent that 1 or 2 days per year of cleaning garbage out of the river isn't working. What is the point of riverside development if the view is a river lined and choked with trash? How will you correct this embarrassing situation?
As I mentioned, the Trinity River is not clean. There are during about an 8-year study, the Tarrant Regional Water District came up, working with Texas AgriLife, came up with plans to clean the Trinity River. They came up with 14 best management practices that would effectively reduce pollution by 30%. To the best of my knowledge, once they figured out that plan, they stopped doing anything. And that's the kind of thing that you see over and over again. They're willing to go right up to the edge and then not jump off to actually make commitments to make the river and the river clean and the planning done right. I do understand that since I've gotten up and started talking about this, they've started to address these things in meetings. I also think it's funny that since I started addressing the fact that the minority and women-owned business contracts that they're supposed to be doing and have been failing at meeting their marks and their limits, now they're having an open forum to invite people to do that. So the level of things that the TRWD is doing, I have to stop.
I wish I could finish your sentence because you're on a roll there. Yeah, I think I will not yield your my time. When you talk about how the river looks and what's going on, the water district has resources. They have gotten a lot of money from urban drilling, from gas and oil drilling, from fracking taking place on their property. Instead of using this money to find a way to make water clean so that that fracking water can be reused, they're using it on economic developments. They're building restaurants. They're building ice skating rinks. They're building movie theaters. None of these things are the responsibility of a water district. And so if they use some of that money for cleaning up the river, you know, one of the good things they've done is they've had adopted drain sewers so people can come in and pick up trash. I think getting involved with the community and volunteers is a great idea. I've talked with a lot of Lions clubs and people.
They're supposed to be doing. If they would just focus on cleaning up the water, making sure that it's going to be a desirable place for people to come, more businesses will be able to do that. And that's the purpose of what private businesses and business entities do, is to focus on that once you have an area that's going to be appealing to be able to build on the economic development. And by spending money on that, instead of cleaning it up to bring in the people to do things like that, they've lost, again, their focus on what they're supposed to be doing.
Why hasn't the water board changed and voted to use all of the royalties and monies from their gas well income for the mission of the water board to acquire mountain quality water and flood control?
I'm not sure. Could you read that question again?
I didn't write it.
I know.
Why hasn't the water board changed and voted to use all of the royalties and monies from their gas well income for the mission of the water board to acquire mountain quality water and flood control?
Well, I think that goes back to the question of transparency. Why are they doing anything? We don't know. Yeah, they have all this money. They have all this money and they put it into two accounts, and they tell you this one account that you can't do anything with, which is true. But in the other account, they're also telling you, well, we can only do economic development, which is not true. They actually can use that money for anything that they see fit. And if it needs to be mountain fresh water, which I don't know we have any mountains in Texas or in this area anyway. But I mean, it's again, we do.
Maintain.
Oh, maintain. Okay. Maintain fresh water, not mountain water. But it's the transparency, and it's being, upfront with the people of what this money is supposed to be earmarked for, and they're not doing that. They're telling you one thing, and that's not the truth, and people are not being able to go in and ask questions and challenge them. They close the meetings and, make their decisions before you've even had a say in what's going on there. And that's, again, goes back to the transparency part of it. So we don't know. I mean, I guess when we get on the board, maybe they'll share the information with us. I kept going, sorry.
Don't know. I think it has to do with the fact that, at some point they got an idea in their head that they needed to be focused on economic development and they needed to be building a big fancy project, and they got swept up in that. And they lost track of the core mission. They lost track of what they're supposed to be doing, which is taking care of our water supply and making sure that we all and our future generations have enough water in the future. And to me, that's a failure of leadership. That is a failure of the people who are supposed to be in charge doing their job and letting themselves be distracted by shiny toys. Now, admittedly, it's a very shiny toy, but they've been distracted. And the only way that we're going to stop that is if we put some different voices, a different voice, no offense to my man, but a different voice on the board who is willing to fight for what we need to be fighting for and to take up the pressure to make the changes that must be made in the Tarrant Regional Water District Board of Directors.
I think that would be a great question for Jim Lane and Marty Leonard, but they're not here, and it looks like the cheering section left, so we can't ask any of them. But realistically, I think it's a matter of focus. It's a matter of putting the focus on clean water. If you look at the Trinity River Vision Project, this shiny object, it looks really neat on paper. Bringing cool things to Tarrant County, bringing cool things to Fort Worth, making a neat place on the river, sounds like a great idea. The entire thing is backwards. Instead of cleaning up the water, letting Fort Worth build the infrastructure, and let private investors, business people, entrepreneurs come in and build it, the water district is spending your tax money and money that they're taking from frackers, they're using that to build these restaurants. Nobody's going to open a restaurant next door to another restaurant that's taking taxpayer money. Their taxes are going to pay for their competitors. That is insane. That's why we're not going to see anymore, and we need to change this, and we need to fix it, and we need to regain this focus.
In terms of eminent domain, has the TRWD always been fair and considerate with property owners? How should eminent domain be handled differently?
Eminent domain is a nasty word. I don't know of anybody that has a positive association with eminent domain ever, except maybe Carl Bell, and I don't think that was even eminent domain. That was just flat out buying something for more than it was worth. When we talk about eminent domain, first of all, it must be the last resort. It must be the only option. We're talking about taking people's land, their homes, their businesses away from them, something that they had planned maybe on living there forever. And suddenly we're taking it away because we say somebody else needs it more. Well, the problem is we need to make sure that we're doing that fairly. We also need to make sure that we're absolutely doing it only for the purpose of the water district, which is for water projects. If you're taking people's land away to give it to another developer, that is unacceptable. And I think everybody here can agree with that. That eminent domain, it's like divorce. It's nasty and it sometimes happens, but we need to make sure that we respect everybody involved, including our kids.
You're not talking to people and you're just showing up on their land and taking it over without addressing it, without hearing their concerns, without actually talking with them and helping them understand or looking at different routes. That's not the way to do business, and that's not how we should do business in Fort Worth, I don't think. I don't think that's the Fort Worth way. I mean, we obviously need to, if there's things and projects that are going to be for flood control and sourcing water and things, then it needs to be done in a way that is respectful of the property owner, and they need to be compensated correctly and not shut out and just completely dismissed in the whole process of it, which is what it seems to be happening right now.
Absolutely opposed to using eminent domain for economic development projects, period. The U.S. Supreme Court says it's okay, but they're wrong about half the time. So, you know, if you're going to do it, and if you have to do it, I believe you have to have communication with landowners that is open and trackable and reasonable throughout the entire process, and that everyone needs to be on the same page. And that's really all there is to say about it. I mean, I'm not for it, but it is a necessary evil sometimes. But I am never for it. Again, I am never for it if it's going to be used for economic development. Thank you.
The Tarrant Regional Water District faces a lawsuit and has been accused by media organizations of failing to adhere to state policies regarding open meetings and open records. Is this a genuine concern? And if so, what should be done about it?
You know, I think it is a genuine concern. I think it's a symptom of a greater problem. The TRWD has a habit of going right up to the line and maybe putting a toe over it, but not technically breaking the law. You know, they can take 10 days, and then they can send a request legally to get clarification, and then they have a legal right to send things to the Attorney General. And then, if they go through all that process and they still lost, they have a legal right to, you know, charge you a couple $100,000 for the records request. All that stuff is legal, but it's certainly none of it is within the spirit of the law. And that's what they need to be worried about. And again, the reason they're not is because they have bad leadership. They have entrenched leadership that does not understand what they need to be doing and has lost their way, and that's why we need a new voice and a new presence on the TRWD board.
Yes, absolutely, and I think I mentioned this earlier, talking about a lot of times they will intentionally have a meeting without a quorum present so that they do not have to follow the Open Meetings Act. I think this absolutely violates the spirit of the rule. People should be able to understand the deliberation that takes place when a board makes a decision that affects them. It should not be a rubber-stamped issue that comes in front of the board and it gets voted on 5-0 or 4-1 and nobody knows what's going on. They should hear me say, this is why I support this. They should hear me say, this is why I oppose this, so that they can watch this online. They can hear what I'm saying, and then they know whether or not they want to re-elect me next time. That's how a board's supposed to operate, not to where it just looks like every decision's made 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. So I think we absolutely need to open that process, not just, they kept silent for years. Now all of a sudden, right before the election, they're going around talking to everybody. They're holding a job fair on the first day of early voting. This is not how open government is done. That's not what it means. It doesn't mean don't show up to the forums, but show up to your own TRWD events.
Doing the research when I started to run for this, there's a lot of information out there and it's a lot of reading. And in finding out that over 300 contracts were rubber stamped 5-0, man, I have 4 people in my family, and just to get to a dinner place, there is never a 4 vote. I mean, that's ridiculous. So it's just all that kind of stuff, but I mean, said it before, it's like, it's just a courtesy, and it's the way that we do business, and it's just the whole respect of how the process is supposed to work, that everybody gets to have a say in the decisions. You need to know with your own personal research of what you're voting on, and not somebody coming in and saying, this is what it is, let's everybody vote on it. You need to do your own research. You need to be accountable for what you're voting on to the people. And as you said, if we're not making the right decisions that are in the best majority of the people, then we shouldn't be voted back in.
The board members just make decisions.
Charges of corruption and mismanagement at the Water District and on the Water Board have surfaced during this campaign. Do you agree with these allegations? And if so, can you provide specific examples?
Okay. Yours or mine?
Oh, Dora. Okay.
So the question is about whether or not they're, what was the question?
Examples of corruption.
Corruption, okay.
And mismanagement.
Mismanagement. Well, I just look at the TRV, I think that shows you right there's mismanagement. I mean, there's no question about it. I don't know how much more proof you need. It's been in progress for 10 years now, and we still don't have anything but a movie theater, a restaurant, and floating in water that I wouldn't put my children in. It's just, all of it is, and then the price of it went from, I think, a couple of $1 million, or I forget the numbers now, but it's like up to billions of dollars now. And somebody who's supposed to be handling this is not ever around, from what I understand. There is no management, there is no guidance, there is no oversight in it. It's just completely run amok. It needs to be changed.
So I think presenting a river as a place you can go and swim and play and bring your family, when in fact it is dirty, is a pretty good example of mismanagement. And that's not the only example. That level of promotion without exploration of the facts is just kind of the way they operate. In terms of corruption, I've heard a lot of things. And, I'm someone who believes in the law. And if I had evidence of real capital C criminal corruption, I'm going to take it to the DA. I'm not going to bring it here to a forum because that's legally what I feel obligated to do. So I can't say that because I don't have any proof of that kind of thing. But it does seem to be like a lot of things are happening behind closed doors, and there needs to be a lot of transparency. And the only way to get that is, one, to change leadership, and two, to change the structure so that every board member is required to do personal financial disclosures, so that every board member is required to be limited to 3 terms, so that we have single-member districts, so that every part of Fort Worth is able to elect their own person.
Yes, absolutely. Corruption is a term that has a legal meaning, and so we've got to be very careful with that. But there's another word that starts with C that's cronyism that absolutely is present in the Terry Regional Water District. There's another one that starts with A, nepotism. If you were to draw the family tree of the Terry Regional Water District, it would look like a tumbleweed. That's one of my biggest concerns. It may, the amount of friends getting benefits, the amount of family members getting benefits, it makes, 20 years ago, MCI had the Friends and Family Plan. We thought it went away. It is now the Terrace Water District. We have a congresswoman's son that was appointed to run the Trinity River Vision that had never managed a project before. There was not a job search conducted, and he was giving a high six-figure salary to do this. This is not acceptable. This was done simply because of who he was related to. There's lucrative business deals that are done simply because of who some of the board members went to college with. This is not acceptable. Sunlight's a great disinfectant. Put the information out online. Let people know about the process.
What are your plans for the East Texas pipeline? Keith?
I support the East Texas pipeline, assuming that it is a good deal as it's been presented. Since I started running, I've heard a lot of things, and if it is as critically flawed a plan as some indicate, then I'm going to have real questions. But as of now, the contract was signed about 2 years ago, and if we bail on it, the second we bail on it, we're going to get sued. And I'm guessing we're going to lose that. So, unless it is a really, really critically flawed plan, then, we're there. We support it. It is a contract that we are in and we have signed. And I do believe that government entities have an obligation to live up to their contracts. If we start breaking contracts now, well, who's to say that someone who has a contract with us isn't going to break it 10 years from now and say, nah, you have a history of breaking these contracts. We don't need to worry about that. This isn't about this year, it's long term.
Yes, I agree. We absolutely have to hold up our end of the deal when it comes to contracts. My concern with the pipeline as it's currently implemented is that it looks like Fort Worth's getting a raw deal. Now, I'm an engineer. This is going to be a little nerdy, but I'm going to try and do it real fast. This is the Regency Water Planning Group's report. In it, it mentions that this pipeline brings no new water to Region C. Now, that includes Fort Worth and Dallas. But if you turn to the page on Dallas County, it says ways for Dallas to get water. It says the integrated pipeline. Now you turn to the page for Tarrant County, and the integrated pipeline is not mentioned anywhere. Then you look at the report that was done by 3 engineers, one of which now works for the TRWD. It says there are almost no cases where Tarrant will get any water from this pipeline, and Dallas will be able to take 25% of its East Texas water needs now from the lakes that we own 100%. I will have these documents. I've got them highlighted. You can look at it. So while we need to continue pursuing pipelines and that technology, we need to make sure we're not getting a raw deal because we're paying 55% of this pipeline.
It's true, it's a big concern when you have a contract that may already have been signed and in place and it is solid. But I think we need to also look at how they're going about the pipeline and the land and all the way that they're going into the way it's being run across people's lands and stuff and how they're treating the people that it's happening to. That's a huge concern. I think they really need to be able to, if it's not a benefit to Tarrant County, and if it's something we can renegotiate or do something else with, find other ways that's going to benefit Tarrant County, we absolutely need to do that. But we need to be focused on the eminent domain and the abuse of that and how they're treating the people that this pipeline is going through when we have easements and right-of-ways and people are showing them this is a better route to go and they're not even listening to them. They won't open the door and talk to these people. They're just flat fixed on what they want to do, how they want to do it, and that's not how business should be run, or board should be run.
The TRWD owns floodplain property in downtown Fort Worth, which could be turned into premium real estate development. Should they leave it in its natural state, or should they develop it?
Well, since I'm downriver of that, development, I'm not so sure. I would really have to know and understand what it's going to entail and how they're going to ensure that the people on the east side of Fort Worth are not going to have their homes flooded because of what they plan on doing with the floodplain on this side of town. It doesn't seem that they're very ever forthcoming in what they're going to do and how they're going to alleviate it. If you go to the Corps of Engineering, you'll see that they already say that whatever is happening upriver is already going to be affecting people downriver. And if we're downriver and you haven't addressed the concerns before you start doing things upriver, that's my home, that's my children, and that's huge. And you need to be respectful, and you need to be planning ahead and processing it so that it doesn't affect everybody at one time while somebody else is getting the benefit.
The nature of floodplains is that they're going to flood. So I think it's a better idea to leave them in their natural state. Because you're setting yourself up for disaster by building in those sorts of places. And so, yeah, leave them in their natural state.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, absolutely. This is, from just the sound of the question, building in a floodplain does not sound like a good idea. I think this is something that needs to be deliberated on by the board. This needs to be deliberated openly. You need to look at why are they even considering doing this, you know, and what are the benefits from it. But from the sound of it, hey, can we engage? Should we be engaging in more economic development in a floodplain? I think that goes contrary to everything that we've said tonight. So the responsibility of the water district is to make sure we have a supply of water, which they haven't done a good job of focusing on, and we need to make sure that we're controlling floods. And if they're considering building in a floodplain, that doesn't sound like they're focusing on that either.
A lot of money's been spent on this campaign.
Sure. It's really a pretty clear situation that we're in. You know, I haven't been able to spend a lot of money on this election because I'm raising money from my family and from my friends and from folks that I know and that I call on the phone who I have a relationship with and say, hey, can you give me $25? Can you give me $50 to help support my campaign? It's not a lot of fun, by the way, but you know, that's how I do it. You know, this race is about water. We cannot survive in this area without water, and we are not going to have an adequate supply if we don't start planning now in a realistic way. That's just, it doesn't get any clearer than that in my mind. And what's at stake? Whether or not my daughters are able to raise their families in this area. Because as we're going now, they're not going to be able to because we will be in at least as bad a state as California.
Yeah, this is a race that a decade ago nobody paid attention to. In fact, I never heard of it until maybe about 2008 when, and I think a lot of that's been driven by what the water board's been doing. When they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, which is planning for our water future, then nobody really wanted a job that pays you $150 a month in order to oversee water. Suddenly then, once they got engaged in the economic development, once they started to realize we can take this gas and oil money and we can use it to reward friends, we can reward family members, do these things, suddenly there was a reason to want to keep control of that, to take a grip on things. And they have raised a lot of money from very wealthy people in Dallas, if you look through their campaign reports, which for every other entity in the state aren't available online. For the water district, you have to go personally request it. You can't just go look online. But you'll see Ross Perot Jr., you'll see the Hunts, you'll see the Hills, you'll see Sewell, you'll see a lot of these people because they know they're trying to make sure that they get their water in Dallas, even if Fort Worth is left out in the process.
I think it's the entrenched incumbents that are worried about it. Why do you think they're the ones raising over $500,000 and somebody said now it's going to be closer to $1 million that they've raised just on their own to make sure that they stay in office? That's crazy. I mean, especially when they were talking just a couple of years ago, they're maybe spending $2,000, maybe up to $5,000 for an election, because all they had to do was pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm running. Come vote, because nobody else knows what's going on over here. I was at a senior community last night, and they were like, I didn't even know a water board existed. Well, a couple of years ago, I didn't either. But now everybody knows, because of the behavior that they're portraying and the arrogance that they have It's awakened a lot of people, and it needs to stop, and it needs to change this election.
At this point, all the questions of which I've gotten are repetitive of questions we've already answered. So I'd like, at this time, let the candidates make a closing statement, and we'll do it alphabetically.
So I just want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Fort Worth Business Press for coming out, especially for the water. Been to a lot of forums, never gotten water before. Keep this bottle as a souvenir. You know, as I've said, this race is about water, it's about water, it's about water, and it's about our future. And if you want an independent voice who's going to fight for those things, who's going to make sure that they start planning in a reasonable way, make sure that they stop misleading the public about the quality of our water, then I encourage you to get out and vote for me. My name is Keith Annis. I'm the first name on the ballot, and I would really appreciate your support. Thank you.
I think when you look at this race, what you see is a failure to manage, a failure to lead, and a failure to plan, and a failure to disclose, actually. But I think when you look at some of the things that have gone, when you take a project that was sold to you as a $200 million project and became a $1 billion project, when they said it would take 4 years and it became 10 years, I work in engineering and project management, that gets you fired. Right? And if it's somebody's fault that works for you, that gets them fired. And if you don't fire them, then that gets you fired. And so I think when you take a look at the board, it's time to fire Jim Lane and Marty Linder. That is the only way we're going to have a chance. And so I will bring this project management experience. We will have project management reviews. The public will be invited. They'll be able to look at the budget, look at the schedule, see how we're tracking, and see where your money's going. That is one of the single biggest change that you can make on this board is adult leadership.
If you got me on the board, I'd be one of the ones that's going to read a lot and make sure I make sound decisions based off of information that I find out for myself, not somebody feeding it to me. This is something that is so important. We need to make sure that these meetings at Tuesday at 9:30 once a month are maybe held in the evening, or we have traveling ones so more of the community is aware of what's going on and more people will vote the next time this election is up. And they're going to be involved with the decisions of what's going on at this board. I'm Michelle Von Luckner. I'm number 2.